Feeling so great from the inside out. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would. Feel without. Stretching our self-awareness every weekday morning like a muscle. This window to this godlike experience that you are. Being so super human in that godlike experience that you are. Doing nothing but simply moving our self-awareness around and getting rewarded to feel so great every morning. Your only no-nonsense podcast brought to you through the Best Feeling Network. To feel great, to feel better in life objectively. How's that even possible? With the help of your only body, baby, from the inside out, as we move our self-awareness around. Please allow all of these words to go in one ear and out the other, of course. I'm your host, Herbie. Good morning, everybody out there. You beautiful people out there. Welcome to another Warfare Wednesday. It is 5:37 a.m. in the morning. On September 22nd, 2021. Another Warfare Wednesday. Please note, do not go and run. We are staying right here to talk about a little word you might know as fear. Fear. Something placed into us from the outside world, right? But perhaps something also in which we have control over from the inside out. Is there a way to have no fear in this world? Why would you want no fear in this world? Well, don't you make rash decisions out of fear in this world? Don't you make decisions that you normally wouldn't make in this world when they are colored with fear? Fear for what? Fear of your life, fear of losing the love of your life, fear of losing your friends, fear of losing dependable wages, fear of losing healthcare, fear of losing the ability to feel safe around your friends, to feel safe around yourself. Fear instilled in us to be afraid of being in the company of other people, especially if they claim to think a different thing about us, a different thing about life. The fear that we will not be able to handle being alone. Do we make certain decisions in life due to these fears, and what would happen if we lived a fearless life? Well, doesn't everything always cause fear at some point? Are you always going to be afraid at some point? Well, doesn't it take two to tango? Yes, fear is brought to you by thoughts about what might happen, what might lead to death, about what might lead to certain doom, what might lead to certain death of a relationship which you care about, certain connections in which you feel that you cannot live with right now. It takes two to tango, so having those fears, what if we felt like we actually could handle no matter what happens? Do we fear those things happening, or do we fear our ability to handle? Do we fear our inability to handle those situations? Do we fear that we cannot handle those situations? Do we fear all of what's happening, or do we fear that we will not be able to handle all of what's happening? As our world changes around us on Warfare Wednesday, not just our interpersonal relationships, but our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with the world, our relationship with our country, our relationship with our families, our relationship with our friends, our relationship with our loved ones, our towns, our relationships with our romantic partners are at war. Their favorite tactic? Fear. Brought about by what? The weakness of the human spirit. What can we do about it? Strengthen the human spirit. By how? By relying on our design. The frick's our design? This thing that they call God. So this God thing's real, not the sky God thing out there floating in the sky above the clouds, but rather this design from the inside of the human design that allows you to wash away all bad human suffering, in which will now then allow you to overcome all human suffering in which you need to on the outside. Like being able to be with yourself, be alone, to learn yourself. Or like being able to be with your family. Or like being able to reprioritize in your life. How do we go about this? Let's hold the controller so right in this simulation in which you die every 5 minutes. But that timer is reset with every breath you take. Let's pretend there's a candle in front of every person's lips. Just flickering. Let's pretend, if you would, with me. In your mind's eye or whatever. If you would, please, with me, just pretend that there is a candle, a lit candle in front of every human being's lips that you ever become aware of. It's just now part of their design. And these candle in front of their lips, they're trying to not put it out specifically. They're trying to not put it out. They're not thinking about inhaling or exhaling as they're working, as they're cutting onions, or as they're walking, or as they're jogging, or as they're working, or as they're talking with you, or swimming underwater. There's simply a pretend candle in front of their lips at all times that they themselves are trying to not put out. And this will allow them, this actually then lengthens and straightens the spine. And now if you would with me, please pretend, or please place into your awareness that everybody's tip of their tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front of their teeth too. Wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. And the back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical, as we're holding our controller right up and down. The back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down. As we're holding our controller right, we'll be back right after this break to talk about fear. Have you noticed a gigantic pull towards fear lately? In the media, in social media, in the conversations these days. What do you mean, Herbie? The news has always reveled on fear. What do you mean? But now more so than ever, fear is all around us, being used against us on Warfare Wednesday. Welcome back to another Warfare Wednesday. Welcome back to Pal Go On. It is 5:46 a.m. I invite you to please hold the controller properly today with me today in this simulation that we are in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath you take. I invite you to hold this controller properly with me by pretending there is a candle in front of yours first and everybody else's lips, just like yours, that you're trying to not put out. There's just a candle that's just lit just an inch or 2 or 3 inches in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. You're trying to not put it out. If you would say it with me in your head, even. You can say it with me. Out loud is better, but even if it's in your head, say it with me. You're trying to not put it out. Again, there's a candle in front of your lips. It's just flickering there. You're not thinking about inhaling. You're not even thinking about exhaling. You're just thinking about trying to not put it out. As you leave your swallowing muscles alone. And thinking about how the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical up and down, up and down, up and down. As we are holding our controller properly in this simulation of ours. Remember that the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down. Again, remember with me that the back 1/3 of your tongue is, say it with me, even if it's just in your head. Up and down, up and down, up and down. As the candle in front of your lips is just flickering there and you're trying to not put it out. And think about the back 1/3 of our tongue being, say it with me, up and down, up and down. And how does that feel for you? As we are pretending that there's a candle in front of our lips, we're trying to not put out and to leave thy swallowing muscles all the way alone. Holding this controller properly, we're here to talk about fear on Warfare Wednesday. Fear, Herbie. Fear. Fear. All around us. Being used all around us right now. Even right now at 5:49 a.m. on Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. Fear is being used all around us as we are stretching our self-awareness like a muscle. Wherever you are, whether you are in a cafe, at a bar, maybe you are at the local watering hole, or maybe you are in a pancake restaurant, or maybe you are just all alone on the beach, or on a cliffside, or underneath a tree, writing down some thoughts or working on some homework, thinking about calling up a friend, now thinking about not calling that friend up. Maybe thinking about hanging out with me on this podcast, or maybe thinking about hitting up a friend to hang out with you at the listening of this podcast. Wherever it may be, it is Warfare Wednesday, 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 Wednesday. And what does that mean? Today we're talking about the relationship with the world as it has with you and how it is working through you with fear today, as we are always having our relationships with ourselves first. They are trying to destroy that using fear. Well, Herbie, I don't see fear anywhere. What do you mean fear? Besides in the news media, I don't see them using anything to be afraid of. I don't see them using fear as a tool at all. Over-intellectualism in these cases, as we overcorrect the way humans were going, has turned into fear. As you might see, the language being bolstered ever so slightly every day. Heteronormative, love bombing, trauma bonding. All different words to attempt to control this fear of some kind of measurement in which we cannot measure up to. So we invent more language. To attempt to quell this fear, to feel like we have power over this fear. We attempt to put language to it. When we intellectualize ourselves with more language, don't we allow ourselves to feel like we have more power over something in which we do not yet understand by adding more verbiage to it, but not necessarily more meaning? Possibly confusing movement for progress. As we are pretending that there's a candle in front of our lips and everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out, and remembering that the tip of our tongues want to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, while the back 1/3 of our tongues are vertical, up and down, up and down, up and down. The increased language these days to attempt to create a different society, an elitist society which uses different language, which you might find on TikTok, Instagrams, Twitter, which we thank you for if you are here from any of those platforms. Welcome, welcome, come in. How art thou? Where are you right now? Are you in a cafe? Are you with the business squad checking out this video? Wherever you are, you might notice a large swath of language, fancy language, creating a new elitist society in the internet culture. Not attempting to unite, not attempting to increase unity or increase understanding between human beings, but rather to create division in human beings by creating an elitist language which gatekeeps conversations on the internet, whether they be about sex interests, with the ever rampant growing language added into the sexual criterion of sexual nuances and sexual orientations these days. It's in an attempt to what? In an attempt to language out their way through the suffering of sexual suffering. The suffering that the need of human beings of sex brings, they're attempting to language their way through it to attempt to feel like they have power over something in which they feel that they do not understand, which simply requires a connection to the self. How do we increase a connection with the self? I invite you to pretend that there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out. Remember that the back 1/3 of our tongues, everybody's tongues, are vertical, up and down, up and down. The same way you would remember in a relationship your partner's favorite food, your boyfriend's favorite food, your girlfriend's favorite food. In the same way you have a relationship with your mother and that you know her favorite song possibly. Or your father and possibly his favorite place to sit in the house. In the same way, our relationship with ourselves, we tend to know that the back 1/3 of our tongue wants to be vertical, up and down, up and down. As our relationship increases with our tongue and we begin to orient ourselves more towards what we know the tongue likes to do, which is remain up and down, vertical, back up. The back 1/3 of our tongue likes to be vertical, up and down, up and down. And what does the tip of our tongue like to do in every human, in every being, living creature that you acknowledge? Well, the tip of their tongue likes to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, no matter what vowel they're saying, no matter what consonant they're speaking. As we increase our relationship with ourselves, We attempt to language ourselves, to out-intellectualize ourselves out of this human experience, because these human experiences are coming out from within the self, and we don't friggin' understand the self. Why? Because our relationship with the self sucks. We don't even know where our favorite place to sit is. We don't even know what our face's favorite muscles are to feel. No wonder we have to remind it by pretending that there's a candle in front of our lips that's just flickering there, and all the sensations involved with it, and that we're trying to not put it out. We don't even realize that the muscles that are best involved for breathing activate when we think about not putting that candle out. We don't even know that about ourselves. Our relationship with ourselves is crap. No wonder we're so afraid of everything we do. When your relationship with any person, especially yourself, but if you notice with me, your relationship with every person, when it is not understood, every action is then filled with fear. As you now have to imply, or you now have to infer everything that is happening. Unless you are not afraid of that thing, in which then you can go then to begin asking more questions. Or your spirit will want to ask more questions to begin understanding this thing that you seem to have othered. However, when your relationship with something becomes more clear, doesn't the fear lift? Doesn't the fog lift? And every action becomes enjoyable. As you begin to understand this creature, as your relationship with this creature begins to build, doesn't the fear begin to fade? What are we most afraid of in this world today, if not ourselves? Are we so powerful? Do we feel like we can do anything? Oh, we're this Superman that like we're so afraid of our own powers, or we're gonna blow ourselves up? We're so afraid of our ability to manipulate for our needs. We have needs. We have food needs, drink needs, friend needs, sex needs, romantic needs, companionship needs, guidance needs, fitting in needs, being accepted by others needs, because we feel that we need the support or we need the acceptance of others. We can be afraid of what we do in compromise when we are afraid. We are afraid of what we do when we are afraid. When would we ever be afraid? When we do not feel strong enough to handle no matter what happens. Well, how can you be strong enough to handle no matter what happens if you don't know what's going to happen? Well, you must feel like you can handle anything. How can you feel like you can handle anything? Well, having a strong relationship with this design within you, which allows you to wash out all internal suffering, which may prevent your body from doing what you know must be done. Most oftentimes we know what must be done, but we cannot muster our body to do what must be done because we are suffering. We have needs. There's somebody that we must taken care of, be taken care of by. There's somebody that we must be taken care of. There is a group that we must be fitting in with. There must be a parent in which we must be satisfying. There must be a physical need in which I'm able to satisfy. In order for us to not feel strong. We must have a strong relationship with ourselves in order for our own body to muster the energy that it needs to feel unafraid, that it can handle no matter what happens, no matter what spiritual suffering. It must have a strong relationship with its own design to be able to flush away any spiritual suffering, because we know all the spiritual suffering. We know most of what we feel negative towards that spiritual suffering is the effect on the world that it saps from us by sapping our energy from our vessel. Let's be fearless. Let's try to not put that candle up, but always remember that it is always there for everybody, part of their design, no matter what in their mind's eye. We'll be right back after this break. What does fear feel like? Death? Doesn't all fear feel like death? Don't all roads lead to death when it comes to fear? Here on Pal Go On, as we're always learning together to love life and not fear death. Together, loving life from all angles and not fearing the death that our mind invents in its head. Because we are currently living, although we do die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath that you take. Welcome back. It is 6:04 a.m., reaching the second half of today's show on Pal Go On. I'm your host, Herbie. Today we are talking about fear on Warfare Wednesday. It is September 22nd, 2021, as we are stretching our self-awareness every day on the run, wherever you are. Whether you are chilling in the car or whether you are bowling right now. Maybe you're rollerblading. Maybe you're moving a bunch of stuff from apartment to apartment, wherever you are. Are you remembering that the back 1/3 of your tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down? Whether you are eating cereal in the morning or whether you are watching this in a VOD and maybe eating lunch or eating dinner and eating a steak right now, cutting that into that juicy steak. I hope that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth right now. And I hope you remember that you do not sit on your legs, but rather the weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front and the weight is delivered into the rainbow arches in which you will see behind me, which are part of your pelvic bone. If you cannot see the diagram right now. Wherever you are, is it dark or is it light? Are you looking at a wall? Are you looking at some people? As this candle is flickering in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out, just along with everybody else's as it's part of their design, what is this fear thing that we're talking about all the time? This fear thing. Fear. Can you have fear? Can you have fear if you internally believe that you can handle everything? Do all roads in fear not end in death? Why might we have fear? Why might anything feel like death? At one point in time, everything did feel like death. As you know, when you were a little baby child thing, everything felt like death because everything pretty much was death, including abandonment from people. Including not being liked by people meant death at some point, which was, as you know, as a little baby child thing. So when you got older, right? Of course, that stays with us in some capacity, for some people more than others, depending on what happened. Depending on whatever trauma that they went through as a kid. This fear thing being used against us, as we all have this internal fear of abandonment of people in which we need to overcome, as it comes from an irrational place, which is your baby times, which you are not no longer in the baby times. Yet this fear stays within you and grows with you as if it is dominating over you just the same way that it did in baby times. How do we get over this fear thing? Well, we feel so indomitable from the inside out. How do we feel indomitable from the inside out? This morning, wherever you are, at 6:07 a.m. or whatever time it is, I invite you to pretend there's a candle in front of yours and everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out. No trivial thing. Same way that you would hold your spine straight. The same way that you would want to not hunch your shoulders at any time because your posture is so important to you. Is there ever a time in which you ever perceive human beings as having a design which does not include a candle in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out? No. Is there any time in which you should slouch your shoulders in a way that's imbalanced for you? No. Can you? Yeah. But should you? No. Should you? No. In the same way that should you ever sit with bad posture? No. You can, for whatever reason you might, for certain adjustments of your position. But for the sake of your body, your living experience, your spirit, in order to output energy into what you care about at the moment, as your body is this vessel that's simply carrying out what you really are on the inside, should you ever maintain a livelihood of having bad posture, of having your shoulders slumped over in an imbalanced way? No. Should we ever be aware of human beings as human beings without candles in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out? No. In the same way that you would never want to remain in a life of bad posture. Are we always pretending that? And then remembering that the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down, up and down. In the same way that you might want to fix your shoulders, or remember that your shoulders are not hung down on your ribs, but rather are free floating and suspended above your ribs. The same way you can choose to acknowledge that and feel the way that it feels when you acknowledge that your arms are actually free floating above your rib cages. Or you can choose to have your arms feeling like they are down and slumped and attached down to your what you might perceive as your ribs. You can. But how does it feel for you to remember that the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical? How does it feel for you to improve the relationship with ourselves, our design? As we were not in there stitching together, making sure that the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical, and that it makes us feel this way when we remember that. As we were not there creating that. As we increase our relationship, or as we improve our relationship with ourselves, with this design of ours, that feeling that comes about, would that not be this God thing, seemingly there, but really not there, throughout society, throughout history, in which history was described by human beings? This little invisibility magic trick, could that not be this God thing? And when you have a lack of this God thing, are they not able to instill fear in you, as you now feel like there are some things you can handle and some things that you cannot handle? But all things that the human does, all efforts that the human outputs into the world, require this human vessel from the inside out to feel that it can continue going, can feel like it can continue moving, can feel like it has a relationship with itself and it wants to keep moving. So when we destroy this relationship with the self, we destroy the relationship with this person, with ourselves, and our ability to be ourselves in the world. As we are then dominated by fear from the inside out, feeling as though we cannot handle the circumstances or the consequences of what might arise if we act. And so the fear that bogs us down, that prevents us from acting, well, doesn't it prevent us from acting? And aren't we afraid of our inability to act? Aren't we afraid of our own inability to act when we are afraid? But how's the only way you can be afraid in a way that would incapacitate your body so that you cannot move and you cannot be free to do the things that you know you want to do for yourself, when fear holds you back from doing things that you know that you want to do for yourself? Like exploring this new job, like exploring this new design of this artwork, like taking time to ask others what they think about your music, like taking the effort and the moxie to ask out this potential mate of yours. Are we not afraid of our own body's inability to act when we are afraid? Are we not afraid by our own body's inability to act for things that we want when we are afraid? Does that not cause us to be filled with fear and regret? Well, how do we prevent being afraid? Controlling what's out there, or rather controlling what's in here to make sure that we are never afraid? How do we make sure that we are never afraid? Well, what are we afraid of? The consequences of acting, the feelings of consequences. Are we afraid of the consequences themselves, or feeling like we cannot, or the feelings that we are unable to handle the consequences? Because we know that when we cannot handle the consequences, our body shuts down, and our body does not end up doing what we know it wants to do, like going to work or spending all of its attention on the proper people or on itself, its hygiene or its workplace. And aren't we afraid of all those consequences and feeling like we cannot handle it, so those consequences will definitely happen? But what if we felt like we could handle that spiritual suffering so that those consequences wouldn't happen and our life wouldn't spiral for every fear, for every brave action that we commit over fear? What if for every time that we conquered fear, it was out of understanding that no matter what happens, we could handle, and we would continue trucking on no matter what handles, or no matter what happens in this specific case, this scenario? Well, how do we make sure that happens when we can't predict every scenario? We have a relationship with ourselves. This design of ourselves to make sure that we can flush away all spiritual suffering so our body's not trapped in there no more. Our body continues trucking on. We have a oneness with ourselves. We feel like a oneness instead of othering ourselves, and instead of feeling like ourselves is something that we cannot understand. We begin to have a oneness with ourselves, an understanding of ourselves, that when these feelings come through, we can wash away these negative boggings on our spirit by remembering that the back 1/3 of our tongue wants to be vertical. Remembering that we do have a good relationship with our body. Reminding ourselves that we do have a good relationship with ourselves. We understand what we're going through. We have a oneness with our bodies. We remember that the back 1/3 of our tongues are vertical. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the tip of our tongue wants to be anchored always to the back of the bottom front teeth. We'll be right back to talk about how everything must be one in order for you to conquer all fear. We'll be right back. What does fear look like in the spirit? What does fear look like in the spirit? It looks like an othering. It looks like disagreeableness. It looks like saying no to ideas. It looks like a lack of understanding. Why might this be? Why might it be that fear looks like a resistance to integrating someone's ideas into their own heads to entertain that idea? Why might fear look like resistance towards understanding? Because the human spirit itself, when not filled with fear, is filled with love. It loves life. It loves itself. As in, it loves the feeling that it gets when it remembers that the back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical. It loves getting to know itself. It loves getting to know that the tip of our tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. It loves knowing itself like that. It loves knowing more about itself. It loves knowing that everybody places a candle in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. It loves knowing those things. The only time the human spirit does not say yes to new things is when it feels like it cannot handle washing out or flushing out the spiritual moss, the weight in which whatever that thing brings. If it chooses to accept that idea, if it chooses to entertain or even think about that idea in its head, the human spirit will accept anything because it loves life. It loves all challenges. It loves all things. It is naturally loving of life. Yes, the reaction to fear and pain may be a 3-to-1 ratio to what love is, but to what its reaction to love is. But the human spirit loves life exponentially more than it fears death. Although its reaction may be slower, reaction may be more conservative, more muted at first. And so should the spirit feel like it can handle anything, it naturally welcomes all things, all ideas, all new ideas. There's a natural agreeableness about it, whether that be agreeing even with a deprecating joke. However, finding a happy spirit about it, finding a positive spirit about it, as it knows that it can flush the negative feelings that come along with it. So it doesn't feel trapped with it, doesn't feel jailed by it, it doesn't resent it because it can wash it away at any point in time. What does fear look like in the spirit? It looks like disagreeableness, because fear comes from a spirit in which cannot handle all things, which does not have confidence that its relationship with itself is strong enough in which it can handle all things. So out sprouts fear. What does fear look like in the spirit? Disagreeableness, because the spirit wants to be able to, because a spirit that is not held down by fear is confident that it can handle any situation, any idea. It can wash away any idea, including scary or sad ones. So it will be accepting, it will be agreeable. What does fear look like in the spirit? It looks like intellectualism. It looks like hyperlogicism. It looks like hyperlanguage, as it allows them to put distance between them and whatever suffering that they are experiencing, or whatever problem that they are perceiving to describe. Having extra sophisticated language allows us to feel as though we have control over this fear, but it still reveals a fear in the spirit, which suggests a weak relationship with the self. And no wonder, because we were always using gigantic blocky language to make it feel like the self was something we understood and had control over, as we look at it from the distance and have all these fancy words to describe it from the distance. However, these words always keep us at arm's length, as we feel as though we've dominated what is ailing us, but only put a band-aid on a 10-foot pole between us and that problem. because we were too afraid that we would be unable to handle said problem from the inside out. No wonder we're using all these words like such and such isms, such and such phobias, such and such disorders, such and such syndromes, as these place more distance between us and these ailments and these conditions, these part of the human conditions. Puts more distance between us and these things. What do you mean it puts more distance between us and these things? We're literally saying that these problems exist within us. We're putting more distance between our active selves and these things, and what we are admitting our spirit has anything to do with. Why? Because our spirit does not feel like it can conquer it. So why would it even begin playing the game? So we put distance between us and these problems that we have because we're afraid. We put distance between us and these phobias, these isms, these disorders, these syndromes, right? I'm on a spectrum. I'm istic. We put all these languages, we put all these words to put distance between our active selves, what we feel like we have control over, and these parts of the human conditions that seem to have thrusted themselves upon us, and our spirits do not feel like we can handle, but we can handle them. We can handle them to feel so fearless and feel so great from the inside out, to feel so good from the inside out. We can handle them. We can act without fear of death, but rather love of life. With the help of your only no nonsense podcast brought to you through the Best Feeling Network and your own body from the inside out, baby, as we are doing nothing at all but moving our self-awareness around like a muscle. If you would say it with me, please, even if it's just in your head, the weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. And let's hold this controller properly in this simulation in which we reside in by remembering to, in everybody's mind's eye, as part of their design, remember that part of the human design, that in everybody's mind's eye, there is a candle in front of their lips. So in front of everybody's lips that you are perceiving today, I challenge you. I challenge you. However you want to do it. If you want to throw it like a ninja, or if you want them to just appear all the time, however you want to do it, I challenge you to pretend that there's a lit candle in front of everybody's lips today. Every living creature that you perceive, there's a candle in front of their lips that they are also trying to not put out. In their awareness, they're trying to not put it out. And in their awareness, they're also remembering that the tip of their tongue wants to be anchored closer to that candle that they're trying to not put out. The tip of their tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front of their teeth, at the back of their bottom front teeth, as they leave their swallowing muscles alone and observe their sense of self. I challenge you today to observe. Are you remembering to just observe? Remember to ask yourself, are you remembering to just observe? Remember to allow all of these words to enter in one ear and out the other, using our sense of the world to make sense of the world. Stretching our self-awareness like a muscle every morning, every weekday morning. It is 6:27 a.m. on Warfare Wednesday, September 2021. They're trying to instill fear in us. We will not let them take us alive. Our lives loving life. Far stronger than any kind of fear they can try to instill in us, especially after we dominate all fear from within. There might be things trying to create fear in you from the outside, but all fear comes from within. At the end of the day, we're feeling indomitable from the inside out, feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. I'm your host, Herbie. Good morning, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day. This has been absolutely Pow Go On. Please don't put that candle out. Oh, relaxing music, astral projection, sleep music. See you guys tomorrow when the Truth Hurts days. Y'all better be ready. Let's go. See ya.